Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today will be Mitch Light. He's the executive editor at Athlon Magazine. He is also the sideline announcer for Vanderbilt football. This show is presented by the Well Coffee House, a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. There are 4 locations to serve you in the Nashville area. You can find those in Brentwood, Green Hills, downtown, and Bellevue. You can also find more information at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. And to that, we thank our title co-sponsor, Wellspire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, which is located in the Gulch. Our news presented by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Well, the final score from the football game on Saturday, LSU 66, Vanderbilt 38. Mitch and I will have a fun fact about that score coming up in the podcast. The Commodores are now 0-3 with Northern Illinois coming on Saturday. The guest line, presented by our friends at Boll & Branch, started by Vanderbilt graduates Scott and Missy Tannen. I've slept on Boll & Branch sheets for about 5 to 6 years. They are fantastic, and I had no clue what I was missing until I got them. They are also fair trade certified. That means they're made under safe conditions by men and women, treated and paid fairly. Try them for a month. You can return them for free, but you're not going to want to. Once you get the sheets, try the mattress. That was voted best mattress of 2018. Go to bollandbranch.com. That's spelled B-O-L-L. Enter the promo code Vandy to get $50 off your first set of sheets. Mitch Light joins me now. You know him as the sideline announcer for Vanderbilt football. He's the executive editor for Athlon Magazine, does a fine job in charge of all their fine publications. Mitch, thanks for joining us today. How was your weekend?
It was good, Chris, and I would take exception. I think I do a better than fine job.
Okay, what adjective would you like to use?
I was going to say outstanding, but that might be too strong. I'd say solid. I think solid is better than fine.
Solid. Well, I hope your weekend was solid. And have you recovered from Parents' Weekend at Vanderbilt yet?
I have. It was fun. It was, as some of you all know, that my daughter's a freshman at Vanderbilt, so we were over there. They had nice activities Friday. Went to go back in her dorm room, which I had not seen since the first day. Moved her in, and even though she's in Nashville and we live in Nashville, I have not seen her since. Just actually saw her for about 2 seconds at the Georgia football game. Have not seen her since. In fact, we had to send her something, and I could have dropped it off easily, but we sent her a package. So we are treating this as if she is away at college. So it really was good to see her because we hadn't seen her in a while. So did a bunch of stuff with her with Zoe this weekend.
So what you're saying is you're an absentee parent.
Yes. Which is fine. Hey, I had fully intended her going away to college, so this is fine with me. We get the experience of her not being around without the expense of going to visit her.
I'm not going to know what that's like for a long time.
Yes, yeah. So it's good and bad. It's good. I'm glad. It's strange not having her around, but she's having an absolute blast. She loves it.
Well, let's talk football. Your impressions on the Vanderbilt LSU game?
Nothing surprising. I guess if you would have told me 66-38, I would have been surprised, probably with both, the first drive was, textbook for Vanderbilt. It was pretty cool to see after, their struggles to start the games in the past. It became pretty clear early that Vanderbilt was going to have a tough time stopping LSU. I don't think I've seen a program transform itself on one side of the ball more in the past this year from recent years than LSU. I was talking to Cole Kubelik about this, sideline reporter for the SEC Network, asked him how he thought they were LSU's receivers compared to Alabama's, because I thought they looked obviously pretty good. He's like, Alabama's are more speed guys. LSU's are more like power and strength, and they're obviously pretty fast too. I thought Vanderbilt had, clearly Vanderbilt was gonna, they were gonna be aggressive. They didn't want to let Joe Burrow sit back and try and pick him apart, so they're gonna try and get to him, and obviously that didn't work very well. But I thought what really hurt Vanderbilt was having some defensive backs just take some really bad angles that turn some short, 10, 15-yard catches into much longer catches. I know you can't simulate that speed in practice, and Vanderbilt clearly was not didn't, part of it's athleticism, but part of it's just taking bad angles. I thought Vanderbilt did some decent things offensively, but just really didn't give itself a chance to win because, it had absolutely no answer for the LSU offense.
I keep meaning to look this up, and I can't believe I haven't yet. Maybe you would know. Is that the most points ever in a Vanderbilt game? I mean, there are times I remember Vanderbilt being on the other side of a 60-something or 50-something, but I don't ever remember it coming with the 30-something on the other side.
Oh, that's a good question. I can see why, that's probably not something the media relations looks up. They do it in a win, but don't want to promote things like that in a loss. Woody's teams gave up 70 to Florida, but did not come close to scoring 30. I would have to imagine, I've got a media guide right here. It wouldn't take that hard to look up because you could just scan the scores and rule out. I'm trying to think any games, even any overtime games. I mean, because there's over 100 points, 104 points scored. So, because Vanderbilt, I've looked this up recently because the offense has been so much better the past 2+ years. It's just not often that Vanderbilt scored like 35 points or more in SEC games. There was a stretch there, I guess, in the 80s when Watson Brown was offensive coordinator. But really, in the past few years, they've hit that number several times, but there was just a long stretch where they did not.
I'm going to go backwards in games where one team scored 50-something or more. We'll just walk through this as we go. In 17, there was the 57-13 loss to Ole Miss. So that was kind of close, but not quite there. The 59-0 to Alabama the same year. The year before, really nothing for a while. Tennessee, the game in 2015, the last time Tennessee beat Vanderbilt, 53-28. Boy, that fortune sure changed after that. I guess you never thought after that game that would be the last game Tennessee would win in the series once that one went down. Let's see.
Vanderbilt beat Southwestern 86-0 in 1916. 100-0. Big win over Henderson/Brown. But so that's not 100's not 104. 105-0 over Bethel. Take that, Bethel. In 1912. 100-3 over Maryville. So that's close. 103 so far is the top. I have the easier job. I started at the front. You started at the back.
Yeah, I'm thinking World War II and since. Why don't you start from there, and I'll go backwards. We'll meet in the middle. And in the meantime, we can kind of call out some interesting scores. I wouldn't do this live podcasting, but it is kind of interesting to go back and look at some of these. Okay, 2001, a 56-30 loss to Kentucky, a 71-13 loss to Florida. That was a game that basically cost Woody his job. Yeah. Of course, the most of the 90s were just the opposite of slugfest.
Man, the 48 team sucked. I'll just throw that in there.
The 98 team lost 55-17 to Kentucky. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the 50s and 60s, teams just didn't score a bunch of points.
Right.
So far, the 103 points in that whatever Maryville game appears to be the only thing that was close.
Yeah, in 1990, there was a 56-28 loss to Wake, a 59-28 to Alabama the same year. That was Watson Brown's last season.
I was there.
The 80s, I'm not seeing anything else in there so far.
Yeah.
I bet you that's going to be it.
Yeah. Wow.
We have a scoop.
Yeah, there you go. So, I mean, I guess it's good you score 38. It's not good you just give up 66. So,
let's see. What did you make of the offense? I did not think that was a particularly good offensive game for them. The 3 and outs are the things that bother me. They've had a ton of them this year. I think they had 7 or 8 of them Saturday, plus a couple of turnovers. When you're basically in a game where you're going to have 67 to win, not that winning's a fair expectation, but just making a point here, having 9 or 10 dead possessions is not the way to go.
Yeah, I'm looking up because the 5.1 yards per play is not great. So hold on. 5.1, had 6.6 against Purdue, only 3.6 against Georgia. Going back to last year when they were statistically a pretty good offensive team. Sorry, this, like you said, this isn't ideal podcasting because we're both talking. This would have been their second worst offensive game last year. Could you name the only game from a yards per play that was lower last year? Could you name?
I'm thinking Kentucky.
Nope.
No.
Kentucky was 5.3.
Okay.
South Carolina was 3.9.
Oh my goodness, that was just an awful game. I did not remember it being that bad. I know Shermer had a bad game that day. That maybe his worst of the year.
Vanderbilt only had 284 yards against Kentucky, but they're only 54 offensive snaps. So that's why, a lot of it is product of how many snaps you have in a game. And Vanderbilt had 73 snaps. So yeah, just for people out there, like the national average in yards per play, the computer's a little slow. The team that's 60th or 65th, which is about right in the middle, is 6.2 yards per play. So, obviously anything higher, you're in the top half of the country. So, Vanderbilt's stats the defense has not been good, clearly, but the stats are heavily skewed this year because of the schedule. I mean, I looked, BYU has played 4 Power 5 teams. Vanderbilt is one of few teams in the country that's only played Power 5 teams. Obviously, they had a bye week, so and 2 of those teams were among the best in the country. So I'm not putting a lot of stock right now in their season stats. I'm going to wait a few weeks to get some more games under their belt before you really start comparing things.
I'm guessing Vanderbilt's the only team having played 2 top 5 teams.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm just scared. Yeah. There's very few teams. Auburn's played Oregon and A&M. I'm just talking about teams. There's not many teams that have played 2 ranked teams. And then Purdue obviously had its issues in the next game, but you can say when healthy, Sindelar is one of the better quarterbacks around. So they played 3. 2 of the top 5 quarterbacks or 6 quarterbacks in the country. Then another guy in Sindelar who's clearly a very good veteran quarterback.
Is Bill Connolly updating the S&P right now, or does he do that several games in?
No, it's already been updated. I did not look and see.
I couldn't find it online today. I was going to see if you knew.
Maybe he hasn't unleashed. Wow, this is kind of. I mean, probably won't care. Most people won't care here, but this is Derek King, Houston's good, outstanding wide receiver, quarterback. He's going to sit out the rest of the season as a redshirt. That's strange. He's played 4 games, so he can redshirt. I wonder if there's a discipline issue. So,
is that the guy that the Trask kid at Florida was behind?
Yes. And King just set I think he just set an NCAA record for most consecutive games with a throwing and rushing touchdown in the same game.
Boy, that does sound almost disciplinary or injury related, but
it's a very shrewd move in getting the kid to buy in, maybe think he doesn't have an NFL future, that Houston's a very disappointing 1-3 under a first-year coach. So he says, why don't you come back next year under Holgerson's second year? We can regroup and make a run for the, New Year's Six Bowl. That's just interesting.
Except that you have the grad transfer possibility at the end. So
yeah, that would be funny if Holgerson convinced them to do that and then he bolted.
Right. That's kind of how it goes these days. Well, what do you make? I want to get into Vanderbilt for a minute.
Sure.
I feel like these are harder to do because it's been so predictable. They're playing teams where they're outmatched, and it's the same things that happen when you play teams with better athletes sometimes. But what did you make of Joe Burrow? And how good is he? Where's he in your Heisman race right now?
I would put him, in fact, Braden and I, on our podcast, we were just talking about how the top quarterbacks stack up. Trevor Lawrence's stats aren't great, and he's not going to win the Heisman just because he's gotten off to kind of a slow start, and they don't really have any tough games left. I think he's got to be right up there with Tua and Jalen Hurts right now, and Jonathan Taylor. I thought he was fantastic. Now he's throwing to wide open receivers, and that's what Tua does too. That's what these great teams have great schemes and great athletes, so they're wide open. But I thought he was fantastic, and they ended up running the ball okay, better than I thought watching the game. But they don't have a great rushing attack this year. Lots on his shoulders, and he's clearly a good, confident quarterback. And again, I thought watching Georgia Saturday night, then watching them in person, Georgia's offense sort of looks like what LSU used to look like, just conservative, doing just what they need to do to win the game. Where this LSU offense reminded me of some of the Florida offenses when they were really good, where they could just kill you in so many different ways. So I thought, I don't know what you thought, Chris, I thought LSU in person was far more impressive than Georgia. Now, Georgia's obviously better running games and a better defense, but LSU also was without 3 starters in the front 7.
I don't know because, well, and the starters thing, I guess that's part of it. That if I saw LSU full strength, maybe I would have a little different take. I just think that a lot of times defense is what ends up winning things when things are close, and I just was not super impressed with LSU's defense. Now, maybe I'm being too hard on them, again, maybe the starters thing, but I just did not think that was the LSU kind of defense that I'm used to seeing. The offense is way better. I get that, but I just wonder, again, a game where you're playing an elite defense, a lot of times they can shut some of that down. I don't know if they have the horses on that side to be at the level of a college football playoff team. But you watch this and observe things a lot more than I do, so I'm interested in your take there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. They've given up 38 points twice, and I know Vanderbilt had 2 defensive scores, but they're still points, that the team as a whole gave up. One of them was a little, fluky, the fumble at the end of the half. Maybe it's recency bias, but I was just wowed in person up close with LSU's athleticism on offense. And, Chasen is probably one of maybe their second best defensive player, third best defensive player, the outside linebacker. He didn't play. Both defensive ends didn't play. And
Michael Divinity, who's one of their better linebackers, got knocked out, mid or late second quarter? So that had a toll too.
So who do I think is a better team? I'm probably going to contradict myself here. I'd probably take Georgia on a neutral field, but I think in person, I don't even know if I believe what I'm about to say. I'm just thinking as I'm going along. Just seemed like the gap between LSU and Georgia offensively was bigger than the gap between the two defensively. Like Georgia's better defensively, LSU's better offensively. I just thought LSU has so much more dynamic offensively than Georgia. I think part of that is Georgia's by design, their game plan. Like you saw in the ND game, they just do enough to win. They don't throw the ball downfield a lot. They like to lean on their running game here. We might find out. They don't play in the regular season. I don't believe. No, they don't play because LSU plays Florida and Vanderbilt from the East. Georgia plays Texas A&M and Auburn. So, hey, we might find out in the SEC championship game. I think the LSU-Alabama game is going to be really interesting. My concern for LSU is obviously Alabama's offense. LSU will score points on Alabama, but Alabama will score a ton on LSU.
I think we see it a lot alike. I think that Georgia's offensively talented. They just play almost a 1980s Vince Dooley kind of football, and I wonder what would happen if they took a different approach.
We might find out.
Vince Dooley would be a little strong because they ran all the time, but it's not what LSU does. That's for sure.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think Fromm is a great quarterback who makes great decisions, where like Burrow is more kind of a gunslinger type than Fromm. Fromm's more conservative, but again, that's the by design.
I want to go into the mailbag in just a moment because we have some good questions there. But what's your take on the matchup with Northern Illinois?
Northern Illinois is a very good program that's won a lot. Last year they won the MAC, but it was not a vintage Northern Illinois team. Their offense was brutal. I'm just looking to confirm. Yeah, they went 8-6 overall. They got killed by UAB in a bowl game. It was they had very good defense last year. They lost 2 NFL players. Sutton, their defensive end, was awesome. This year they're going to be banged up a little bit. I think they have a bye week, which is good for them. They beat Illinois State 24-10, lost to Utah 35-17 in a game that was close for a half, and then Nebraska beat them handily 44-8. The spread's 7 or 6.5. I thought it would be like 9.5. Vanderbilt hasn't done much to prove it should be higher. I think it's a game Vanderbilt will win, should win, all that stuff. It's not by no stretch is it a gimme, but Vanderbilt's got the more talented team. And I think that people ask me this too, and this might be one of the questions. I think the frame of mind, the morale of the team is fine. I think from being around them and stuff, I think that the bounce back from this game will be better than the bounce back from the Georgia and the Purdue game. I think reality kind of set in that, hey, the schedule's been very, very difficult. Like the Georgia game, surely they knew what they were going up against, but you point to that all off season. You put so much in that opener, and then you play, you just don't even threaten Georgia. That's so disappointing. You go to Purdue, that's disappointing. But LSU, was just after that game, I just got the vibe. It was clear what happened. They're really good, but the guys in that locker room still think they can be pretty good and win a bunch of games with the schedule softening up. So I'm not concerned about like this team's morale or where their heads are at. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. And I will say this, there are some things that concern me. I don't think in my mind, the 0-3 start's not what bothers me. It's the fact that I thought they would look better in 0-3. Yeah. But having said that, there's still a ton of room for improvement. Now, on defense, I just don't think they're going to be very good at all. In fact, I think they're a bad defensive team. But the offensive schedule they play from here on out, the offenses they face, other than Missouri, are not good. Florida and South Carolina, week to week, those teams are capable of jumping up on you, and that could happen, but they're not teams that you shake in your boots when you're looking at offensively. I mean, I think they face the two best offenses they're going to face already. Maybe Missouri may be better than Georgia, but it's a different kind of offense, and Georgia could kind of assert its will on the ground in a way that Vanderbilt couldn't handle it. But I'm glad you said that because this is not spin. I know you've got to be careful with what you have to say because you can't share everything from the locker room and such. But I got a very distinct impression, and I thought it and felt it at the time at the press conference, that they're not down on themselves. It was almost like, okay, we got that over with, now let's move on. And I felt a confidence that was coming from them. That doesn't guarantee anything, but here's my point. Sometimes when a season goes bad or things start poorly, there's stuff going on behind the scenes, or you hear some chatter, things that concern you, or chemistry issues. I really don't sense that or hear that at all from them or out of that program.
100%, and that's, again, like you said, that doesn't guarantee any wins down the road. But that's the vibe that I got. And I talked to Derek about it after the game. When he's waiting to talk to Joe, we're just kind of waiting there. It's just us in the locker room. And not that he really cares what I say probably, but I just said, I like the message. I just think, at this point, you gotta realize what you just faced and what you got ahead of you. And there's no reason to, beating the team down is not going to get anything done at this point. You got to kind of build them up. And I interviewed, Kalijah Lipscomb, who's a very emotional player. People see him on the sideline, and he seemed to be in a great frame of mind after the game too. And one thing you talked about, the defenses, the offenses they'll face too. I think we'll see some improvement, better play out of Riley Neal. I think it's fair to say that the speed of some of the teams he's played has caught him off guard. Way to say it, but clearly it's a different kind of athlete that you see when you play Georgia and LSU. I think we'll see him. Part of it's adjusting to the speed of the SEC, and part of it's just playing teams that aren't as good defensively as well. So I'm confident we'll see improved play from Riley Neal, and I think the offensive line which hasn't been an absolute disaster by any stretch. I mean, it hasn't been great, but if you would have told me what the offensive line would have gone through with injuries and new guys in new spots, it's probably maybe even been a little, better than I expected. And, I think we'll see Devin Cochran back next week.
Yeah, and I don't know if you had a chance to read it yet. I'm guessing you haven't. I did a 3-2-1 piece today, and I led with that about the offensive line. Basically what you just said, except I had a lot of details in there as to the whys and some other things. But I would encourage folks to go read that if they get a shot. Hey, Mitch, I know you've got maybe 20 minutes left before you've got to go. Let's go ahead and get to the mailbag. That's
Okay.
sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood. If you're looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs, Josh has you covered. Call him at 615-933-1979. Email him, that's josh at hqinsurance.com, or you can catch him on Facebook, facebook.com/JD Minton HQ, on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. Mr. Vandy asks, has Brooks replaced Marlowe on the depth chart at running back?
I don't think so, because they're different type of runners. Like, I was surprised we didn't see Marlowe earlier in that game, so I thought maybe he still wasn't healthy, but he played late. Brooks is more of just your conventional tailback, where Marlowe does different things. And, my guess is we'll see Marlowe more part of the game plan this week. I think some of the things that they use Marlowe or wanted to use Marlowe for, Justice Shelton Mosley can do as well. So maybe that's one reason we haven't seen him on the field as much. But I don't think it's a either or type situation.
I did not initially like them putting Marlowe in the game at that spot because it's out of hand, and I think he's a good player, a player who can help them now. That said, I kind of rethought that, and he really has just not had a lot of reps. So after I had a chance to think about it, it's like, well, you get him a little bit of time in this situation where not a lot's on the line. So if he fumbles or something, it's not a big deal. Again, he could get hurt, but I kind of thought for that reason maybe that wasn't the worst idea to get him some time late.
Yeah, no, I agree. Get him hit a little bit and, get him to see some live action. So, it's not like they're trying to redshirt him again like they did last year and he played 3 or 4 games. So,
Ann Arbor says, from the sideline perspective, did LSU's guys look significantly bigger than Vanderbilt's? If so, what position advantages and size were the most notable? I can tell you one off the top of my head. That kid that was playing left guard that threw that block where he just flung Odingbo to the ground like a rag doll. That's one place where they were bigger.
Yeah, no, yeah. The Adrian McGee's their left guard. Yeah, yes. The answer is yes. They are just a physically. Maybe it's part of the uniform. Just certain. You just expect certain teams to look bigger, better, stronger. Yeah, LSU. They're just a different kind of athlete across the board at LSU. And that being said, there's a stretch there where, like 2 or 3 plays in a row, where Keyshawn Vaughn made a guy miss, and Shelton Mosley made a guy miss, and then Kalijah did. And I remember talking to Joe. I was like, hey, obviously LSU's got the better team, but Vanderbilt's shown they've got some athletic guys who can make people miss too. But LSU's just they're a very well put together team.
Natchez T. Ray says, following up on that question, did you see a noticeable difference in speed?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, just you see that a lot. LSU's a fast team, and they just have more overall team speed than Vanderbilt. I'm not. I think a lot of that was I mentioned some of the Vanderbilt secondary guys taking bad angles, which is part of speed, part of skill, part of there's a lot to being a defensive back. But yes, I mean the LSU's bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah, and I think these matchups, the Georgia and the LSU ones, I think speed is the hardest thing to overcome in football because, again, I think I've used this on another podcast, maybe one with you, and you and I are running a foot race, and you're consistently a second ahead of me in the 100-meter dash. There's just nothing I can do, and I just think that's really the case with them. I think some of these other games, things are going to come back down to earth a little bit. Now, the exceptions in some areas are going to be Florida, Missouri, and South Carolina, but those teams each have some issues as well.
Yeah, right. It's not all about just who's faster and who's more athletic. That's if that was the case, a lot. You could say Vanderbilt wouldn't win many games ever, and they beat teams. And in certain, Missouri seems to recruit speed very well, and so yeah, I mean it's the gap will not be as large against Florida. Obviously, Florida doesn't have as many athletes as the teams Vanderbilt's played so far, but down the stretch, the gap will not be as large as it's been in 2 of these first 3 games.
What do you make of Florida right now?
Yeah, I didn't see one play of the game against Tennessee. I saw every play of their Miami game and their Kentucky game pretty much. I think they're pretty good. I don't think they're great. I think they're fine to be a top 10 team. I think there's a huge gap between the top 6 teams. Then after that, they do have some decent wins. They've beaten Kentucky on the road. They beat Miami. They beat Tennessee, obviously, which isn't a great win. But, I think Trask has done a nice job at quarterback since taking over. They've been banged up. Zuniga didn't play their best defensive end, and C.J. Henderson, their cornerback. So they've basically been without those guys the last 2 games. So I think they're a tier. I think they're clearly a tick behind. I think Georgia's clearly in the class by itself in the East, and then I think Florida's in the next tier, and then Missouri, or maybe you can put Missouri. I think Missouri. We're going to learn that Missouri, that maybe that Wyoming game was just weird, because they've been dominant again at home since that Wyoming game. But I think Florida's a solid top 15 team. That's the second best team in the East.
Speaking of Wyoming, and I totally agree with that because I've seen them play a lot
Right.
now. My nephew got his first touchdown over the weekend.
I saw that.
Yeah, I was very excited.
I'd pick him up in my college fantasy league, but I'm in a Power 5 league only. So
Well, I don't think, with no offense to Aiden, I don't think you want any Wyoming wide receiver in college fantasy. That's the only touchdown pass that Wyoming has thrown all year, and he caught it. It was a 53-yarder. He got behind the defense. I think, and look, he's my nephew. I'm a little biased. I think Aiden's got real ability. They just can't get him the ball.
Yeah, well, I'd take him anyway. He's probably a good guy to have in my locker room. I like my fantasy teams to have good locker room guys, good clubhouse. So
yeah, he's been a good locker room guy, like at Thanksgiving dinners and stuff like that. That's my experience. So, but no, I mean they can't. They've got. Speaking of which, just kind of a fun fact: Rocket Ishmael's kid is on that team too. He's one of his wide receiver teammates. He signed my son's hat last week, so I was telling him afterwards who he was, and I'll have to pull him up on YouTube one day. But it was just kind of surreal sitting there having watched Rocket Ishmael play when I was in high school and college, and then there's his kid signing my son's hat. So let's see. This is a great question. This is maybe the best one of the mailbag. 96 Door says, for each play on defense, how often do you see us shifting the defensive alignment or play call based on what the offense is showing, or does Carver call the defense for that play based on down and distance, and we stay set in that regardless of what the offense does?
That is a good question. It's depending on where I'm standing. For some reason, I was not around the defensive coaches as much as usual, but just from most other games, we shift a lot. I mean, it's a look over and see, and the coaches. You always see coaches jumping up and down and pointing and doing this and shift. So it's definitely not we're calling a play because it's 3rd and 8 and this is what we're in. They change based on who's in the game for the other team and all that stuff. So yeah, I don't think that's the issue. It's not making the adjustments. It's just there's a lot of other issues. It's clear that LSU caught Vanderbilt off guard early in that first drive. Vanderbilt could not get lined up. You'll see that a lot early in games when teams go fast because it's tough to simulate that. You tell your guys to be ready, and then you just can't simulate that in practice. You can't get ready, and there's a balance between do you try and change your personnel groupings enough, or do you just worry about getting set? And obviously Vanderbilt wasn't set on that first touchdown.
Here's another good question. S.R. Kane says, how would you guys predict the spread for each remaining game as things stand today? We know the spread on this one is at 6.5, I believe, right now, as of today. Let's see. Next game is at Ole Miss. I'm going to tell you what. I'll think of a spread, and I'll let you think of a spread. I'll let you go first, and then I'll answer. What is your gut feeling on the next one that's at Ole Miss?
I'd say Ole Miss by 2.5.
Oh man, I'm thinking Ole Miss by about 7. I think Ole Miss will be judged as a better team, and then it gets the advantage for being at home.
Okay, well we'll see. I think UNLV Vanderbilt by 13.5.
Let's see. I'm looking at the scores. Arkansas State beat them 43-17. Northwestern beat them 30-14. I'm going to go 17. That may be too many.
No, I think you're probably right. I was probably a little low. These are obviously based on what we've seen from both teams to this point. I'm not going to say, well, Missouri's going to lose to this game, so they're,
right.
I'd say Missouri 10.
I was thinking 11, so we're close on that. At South Carolina.
I would say 10 as well.
I'm going to go 11 again, yeah.
Okay. At Florida, 14 and a half. Low because Florida's offense isn't great.
I'm going to go 17.
Okay. Kentucky, Vanderbilt, I'd say Kentucky by 2.5 at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, I'm thinking a field goal. So we're right there. ETSU, do they even...
They
don't
get
really
some offshore, and I don't know how ETSU is doing this year. So, I mean,
Yeah.
let's get that. At Tennessee, pick them.
I'm going to go Tennessee by 2, just because Tennessee's like always favored in that game. And again, Vegas's thing isn't always...
It's based on public perception.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Vanderbilt will win that game. I said it before the season. I haven't changed, but I just think that's not... There's sometimes a subtle difference between how Vegas works and that, and I think for that reason, Tennessee would be a favorite. Like, I remember Franklin's first year, Vanderbilt was a better team and, of course, lost that game, but went in, I think it was, a 1-point underdog?
Yeah, I think so.
That's just kind of how it works.
Basically within 3.5 points for every game.
So really, we're pretty close on. I think we're within a field goal of each other on just about every game.
Yeah.
So, okay, a couple more before I let you go. How do you think the season has gone relative to the staff's preseason expectations? That one's from Door King.
I mean, that's a difficult question. I don't know how realistic coaches are. One thing Bob Shoop used to like. Bob Shoop was very realistic and very honest about things. He's like, yeah, you just, especially early in his tenure here, is like the goal is just 6. We want to get to 6. Where if coach wouldn't say that publicly, he would say, oh, we want to win all games. We're not settled. We're not going to settle for 6 wins or whatever like that. I mean, I think they probably expected that they would lose to Georgia and LSU, and probably expected they would beat Purdue or have a good chance of beating Purdue. And that's pretty much what's happened, except the Purdue game. So I think they just, reset. Kind of the message after Saturday was the new season starts this Saturday, and just take it from there.
This one also from Door King. How do you feel about their bowl chances?
I would say slightly less than I did before the season. It has nothing to do with the 0-3. It's just have not really played, have not played as well as I thought. Like the Purdue game is the one that's I'm not really judging them on Georgia and LSU too much. I'm judging them on Purdue and the defensive concerns there. I would say the offense has been slightly, not quite what I expected, and the defense has been not quite what I expected. So just a tick not as good on both sides. So I think before the season, I think my prediction was 6-6. I don't feel as strong about that now. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Wouldn't surprise me if they won 7 games either. I mean, I just think with the schedule they have, there's a little bit of a variance there. But specifically comparing it to my expectations before the season, I don't feel quite as good as I did.
Well, and when we went through lines, we basically collectively expected them to win 3 games, with the UT game basically a toss-up. So I think that's a pretty good barometer right now. 4 wins won't get you there. But now, can they get better? Yeah, that's just the part that's hard to predict, because before the season, I thought they would be 0-3 at this point. And that's why the how matters to me, because the team that I thought they had hasn't quite shown up yet, and that affects my expectation going forward. Now, does that mean they can't get by it? Of course not. And just the weird dynamic of those Georgia and LSU teams doing things that you can't stop is the one thing that I would say, I think fans feel like they wanted to jump off a cliff after this weekend, and I don't necessarily blame them, because I was there and I saw that too. But that's the one thing that should get everybody pause, is things are going to play out differently going forward in a lot of ways, just because of the dynamic of who they play.
Right. And this is still Tim Corbin. I know it's a different sport, and obviously the expectations between the programs are different. But how many times have you heard Tim Corbin say, you can't let the SEC beat you down? Like, you can get bruised ego. You can hurt your feelings when you think you've got a great baseball team and you're 7-6 in the SEC. Well, same thing here. You can't let playing top 5 teams destroy your season. You got to realize who you've played.
Well, and the weird thing is you see that work in reverse with some of the baseball fans at times. They're like, well, we beat this team. Vanderbilt fans, we beat this team, but I don't think they're that good. I'm like, well, let's consider what they were playing, because great pitching can make good teams look inept.
Exactly.
Any parting thoughts before I let you go? I know you cover the college football landscape pretty well. I want to give you a chance to talk about your podcast that you do with Braden Gall. But before I let you do that, anything else of note that's Vanderbilt related, college football related, anything of interest to our listening audience?
One thing we haven't talked about is Riley Gay's late game injury. And he is 4 for 4, 5 for 5 on field goals, and he got hurt on making a tackle on a kickoff. So that would be an underrated injury if he's not able to go. Jevin Rice came on and kicked an extra point, but has not kicked a field goal in the game. And if you listen to what our expected spreads were for down the stretch of the season, could be a lot of tight games. So field goal kicking could be very important. So that's something we'll have to monitor going forward. But yeah, I like you said, I gotta head out here. Something I gotta do. But you can listen to me and Braden Gall on the Cover 2 podcast. We talk national college football twice a week on Mondays and Wednesdays. And you follow me on Twitter at AthlonMitch.
He's Mitch Light. I'm Chris Lee. Mitch, thanks for joining us. And to our audience, we will catch you with more episodes coming later in the week.